All right. And we're live.
All right. Do we have sound?
We have sound. I see levels. So we're sounding off.
Nice.
Yes. So the big challenge is to make sure that we're actually still physically moving.
Yeah, because we're used to. Thankfully, I have that. I actually have the camera out of the corner of my eye.
Oh, good.
So I can actually pay attention to that somewhat. So
nice.
I think that will be okay.
Good. Yeah, because sometimes also the little connection to the video freezes in the streaming, and so we're talking. The sound is beautiful, and it's like a frozen area.
But people can't tell because you're not moving because you're used to doing a podcast. So.
Right, that's true. So we can be more animated. So I know the timing's a little bit different than usual. So there might not be many people in chat, but anybody in chat, please let us know if you're seeing or hearing anything strange, or if you have anything that you want to contribute to the discussion.
For sure. I would be very interested in that.
And tonight's discussion is Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Yes. I was told that we had wanted to shoot this in 4:3,
yes,
but that it was not technically possible, and so we were not able to.
Right. I was thinking about black and white as well, but I thought that was pushing my vision a little.
Personally, if we did 4:3, cutting me out of the shot, making it black and white, I'd be very excited about that.
Yeah.
But because I don't necessarily love how I look, but I understand that people have thoughts about it, as they have made very clear on Twitter.
Yes.
Yeah, when talking about Zack Snyder's cut of Justice League.
Right. Yeah, and speaking of the 4:3, I saw some side-by-side comparisons of the theatrical release 2017, and it looks like it was all shot in 4:3 and just cropped, because I was surprised how much off heads touching the top of the screen there was.
So I'm going to let you in on a little secret about film,
yes.
which is that when films are made, most are actually never shot in the aspect ratio. They are eventually, an aspect ratio here just means the ratio of horizontal to vertical that you see. And so, when you did SD TV, it was all 4:3, and then later we went to 16:9, but not even all films are 16:9.
Right.
And so even if you have an HD TV, you still get some black bars. But film and television is almost never shot in the aspect ratio that it's eventually presented in, because directors and cinematographers want to be able to go back and reframe in ways that make sense. They want to be able to do their own little pan and scan or whatever later and fix things that they find not helpful about the way that things are shot, especially if you're shooting on film. You don't get to see how it's happening on the film until later. Maybe you have a little view in a monitor or something, but it can be difficult. And so a lot of things are shot on much larger frames with much larger view areas than we know.
Right.
And so that's why if you see old films where they were converted from widescreen to 4:3 for VHS. When that started happening, you get some films where suddenly the boom mic is in the shot.
Right. Yeah.
And that's because it's being filmed at a much wider view angle than it was planned for a theater release, and then it was eventually going to be cropped off. And so all of the entirety of this film was planned to be released in IMAX when Zack Snyder was originally working on the original version of Justice League back in 2015. Right. And so everything was shot with IMAX in mind, and then also a theatrical release probably for widescreen as well. And so when you see comparisons, I've seen some other comparisons where they're like, oh, look at how dark the Snyder Cut is, where they do this thing where it's like, well, to be helpful, we cropped the Snyder Cut. And it's like, well, in that shot, there was actually a bunch of gray sky that makes the shot seem much lighter, and you've cropped it now to make it match the Whedon version, which is super bright.
Right.
And it's like, well, that's not a matching thing. You've changed, by cropping it, you have changed the tone of the shot. And yes, Snyder Cut is darker, but go look at that scene that they're using, the scene that I'm talking about, just to lampshade it, is the picture that is getting shared around is Wonder Woman on top of the statue. right
okay.
before she busts in
Yeah.
to murder the guy. And the secret there is that canonically in the script, that's an overcast day. Like, you can see this in the original like setup for that scene, when like the people start busting into the bank. It's not a sunny day. It's not bright. It's an overcast day, and it's that way specifically. Like, that's a choice.
Right.
Whedon came back and decided, oh, this should be a sunny day, but then in doing so, that creates some kind of continuity error. And the sun is covered by clouds or whatever and goes away, but it's London. Is anybody going to be that bumped by it not being bright like Hawaii?
Yes.
No, probably not.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So like the 4x3 thing is one of these things that is a great example of what we're going to be talking about today with the Snyder Cut, which is that people it feels like they really want to complain, and they fixate on these certain aspects of the film. And then when you start to dig into why those aspects exist the way they do, you're like, oh, right. And 4x3 is that way, which is like, this was Zack Snyder was filming this for IMAX in 2015.
Yes.
And also, when he got brought back to do the Snyder Cut last year, it was going to be released in IMAX. So he was supposed to be able to do his proper creative vision in IMAX as a full release. And even though the pandemic was ramping up, the idea was like, oh, the pandemic's going to be over. We're going to be able to release this. Yeah. And then it goes to HBO Max. And at that point, it's like, well, we really could reframe this entire thing in 16:9 for people, or we could just release it the way that it was shot and intended to be. And the people complaining, it's like there's no part of the film that is missing here. Right. You are not missing the sides. Yes. The sides of the frame.
There were more members of the Justice League.
Yeah, there's just 2 other members. They got cut out. It's erasure.
Yeah.
It's like, no, those pieces of the film don't exist. And you can tell from the title card that the entire thing was supposed to be in 4x3.
Right.
And so that is a thing that's like, yeah, am I like super excited to watch 4x3 content? No. But I'm not gonna like be a big baby about it. Right. And like be like my old uncle who'd be like, when they have the movies in widescreen, there's black bars on my TV. I paid for this big TV. I shouldn't be only using 65% of it. Right. It's like, no, old man, just enjoy.
Do you think that first trailer that we saw that was promoting it being on HBO Max, that was 4x3 and black and white, was kind of testing like how people were going to react to seeing it that way? Because it sounded like that would have been his ideal if he would have had, they wouldn't have said anything about it. He wanted to do a black and white cut of this, or black and white version.
I don't know how serious Zack Snyder was about black and white. Oh yeah. But I do know he was extremely serious about IMAX. And I'm not going to say here that he was super excited about 4x3. He's excited about IMAX, and IMAX is 4x3. Right. The entire idea of IMAX is that IMAX theaters are built where you sit much closer to the screen than you usually do in a normal theater, to the point that it fills your peripheral vision. And the idea of IMAX is not that, oh, it's 4x3. The idea is that you sit closer to the screen, it fills your peripheral vision, and you feel immersed in the viewing experience. Right. And so I really feel like Zack Snyder was really excited about that. And then, a lot of directors and a lot of people love black and white. You see this with, Mad Max. Right, yeah, they did Yeah, you see this with the Coen brothers. The Man Who Wasn't There was black and white, but filmed in color and later color graded to be black and white. And, a lot of people love black and white. I like black and white to a certain extent. I understand the fixation on it. But I don't know how. I think it works really well for a trailer. I don't know how well that decision would have worked for this film, for Justice League. Right.
Yeah, that's true. Well, let's talk a little bit about just kind of your history or experience with these heroes and this world. Were you a DC Comics reader when you were younger?
So no, I mean, that's going to mark me by saying no, by the way. But,
I think both of us, we have to shut everything down right now.
No, but I think it's important that we say that, out the gate, is that, like, if you are a super big DC Comics fan, like, you might not like the way that we talk about this film or DC Comics. I think both of us, neither of us are really like super diehard huge fans of Zack Snyder either. And so what I feel that I would like to bring to this discussion is just sort of a calm sense of sanity.
Thank you.
In the raging tide that is online hot takery.
Yeah.
And so my history with DC is really that when I was a kid, I thought comic books were garbage, and I didn't like them, and I thought they were for like buffoons and children. But then later, I met some really great people who were big fans of comics and like would talk about, graphic novels and things. And so, I read Watchmen. I was told at length about things like Red Sun and, the Alan Moore arcs of Batman. And the people that I was interacting with, they really taught me to really view like what I found out from them was that my criticism of comic books was something that they also felt too, and that also there were other comic books that addressed that. Like, there were comic books for me that did those things. It's like, oh, if you think Superman is jingoist or something, like it's just too pro-America, well, you should read Red Sun.
Yeah.
Like, you should really interact with it. And if you really don't like superheroes at all and you think that it's all for American hegemony, it's like, you should read Watchmen. Like, and if you're like, oh, you hate Batman, well, read The Killing Joke. Right? Yeah. Like, there's all that stuff that is available. And so for me, my arc with DC is coming from a place where I didn't think I liked comic books at all. But finding out that there were a lot of comic books and graphic novels that were written for people like me who were very skeptical of the medium, and I enjoyed them, and they convinced me. Like,
nice.
So I'm not a huge fan now. Unfortunately, I don't read as much as I should, but I enjoy them, and I enjoy discussing them and talking about them.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I think I'm a little similar. It always seemed like so. I've gotten some criticism in comments for saying this about Star Trek as well. So Star Trek was one of those things that the older kids liked, and I was like, oh, that's not quite my thing. I don't quite get it, because I was really small trying to like keep up with older kids in the neighborhood. So Star Trek and DC Comics kind of, that was what older kids were doing, and I couldn't quite figure it out, and it was Star Wars and Marvel that ended up being the things that made the most sense, and for my kind of age group and generation. And it might have just been like the differences in the in ages in the neighborhood. So yeah, I didn't, similar to you, I didn't get to DC Comics until until the kind of introduction of the graphic novel and the collection of these story arcs, and then really saw some of the amazing stuff that was done with Batman and Watchmen as well. And I also so the only DC Comics I think I read closer to university age would have been like the Vertigo imprint, so Sandman and a lot of the
all those are very well liked. Didn't Alan Moore work on some of the Sandman stuff? Yeah.
So I liked a lot of that, and then got into more art comics and kind of alternative press and small press stuff. But yeah, my childhood was mostly Star Wars and Marvel was kind of the standard. So it took a while to get to that. The interesting thing I've always thought though about DC heroes is how they maintain this identity, and I think it was something that early on the designers or the artists, or probably the publishers were thinking about, is the iconic emblem. Like, keep every character, they really focus on having some identifiable iconography that Marvel kind of missed. Like, Marvel has costumes and colors and things, but it doesn't really mean anything. And they've kept the brand alive.
Yeah. Spider-Man doesn't have like a logo.
Yeah, right.
He doesn't have a motto. And like, DC got that pretty early. Like, even back, when Superman was invented, you have like the original Superman motto being like truth, justice, and tolerance.
Yes, right.
It's like that's a character that had a motto and it had an emblem. And I think that you're correct. That DC was very forward on creating iconography to go with its heroes.
Yeah. And so even when there were no superhero movies or maybe a decline in comic book sales, they could still print T-shirts and, it was still out there. And you're like, oh, Green Lantern, Superman, Flash, you identified those heroes in that way. So that makes it a very different branding-wise and maybe very different in your expectations that you take to a DC Heroes movie as opposed to a Marvel movie, because you have to be introduced a lot more to those characters because they're not as... maybe Spider-Man, but other than that, they're not as like well established and well known.
Yeah, that's true. But I also think that DC has done a good job of reintroducing people to heroes that people forgot about. So I think Green Lantern is a great example, and it's one of the there's a fun thing in the Snyder Cut where there's the big battle that shows Darkseid, and you see the hand get cut off,
right?
And people are like, oh, it's just all this violence for the sake of violence, and it's like. No, if you're a Green Lantern fan and you like DC, you see that and you're like, oh my God, like that's amazing.
Yes,
you're really out of your mind for that, because it's like, yeah, like that it goes to this mythology about these characters that was kind of, Green Lantern still isn't really a hugely popular character, but is a cool character in a lot of ways. And yeah, I think that you're correct that DC has less work to do. They don't have to introduce as many things. Like people tend to know who Superman and Batman are.
Yeah.
But they also have done a good job of reintroducing people to their sort of like back catalog of heroes that exist, and then also recontextualizing certain things. So, the choice of having Jason Momoa, play Aquaman was Snyder.
Yeah.
He decided that. Previously, Aquaman was a white boy. Like. To a T, and it was Snyder saying like, oh, there's a lot of Pacific Islander history that Moana came out, also about Pacific Islanders, centric mythology, and so I think they've really done a good job of updating their characters and reintroducing us to their characters in a way that feels very meaningful.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, very good. So, well, where should we start as far as... So, you have not, and I have seen the 2017 theatrical.
Yes, I have not seen the original cut. But I did watch a video today that described the differences between the two cuts.
Okay.
And
cool. So that's something that both you and Zack Snyder have in common.
I found that out today.
Yes.
In doing research for tonight, I read an article that mentioned that Snyder has never seen the original cut.
Yeah, and I think that's for the best. I think, that just the timing and all the difficulties with the studio to actually see what they did to his vision and to that story, because a lot of the story beats are still in there, so it's recognizable. He would recognize it as that's what I was trying to do and what happened, how.
Yeah, so there's other things I think that we should lead with, but
sure.
there's one thing I would like to talk about in the differences between the cuts. There was one thing while watching that I was absolutely certain was Whedon. I was like, this is full Whedon. No way Snyder did this. This is just he picked up the scene from Whedon and put it in. Right. I would bet money on it being in the original theatrical cut, and that is Barry Allen's introduction scene. Because I think Barry Allen in this film is a really great display of the fact that when Snyder wants to do something Whedon-esque, he can do it.
Yeah.
And Barry Allen is a very Whedon-esque character, even in the Snyder Cut.
Right.
And so I expected that, the whole scene with him saving the woman and the slow motion and everything, that's just full Whedon. That has to be Whedon. And then I was watching, and they were like, yeah, this scene where Barry Allen is introduced was not at all in the original theatrical cut. And I'm losing my mind. It's like it's the most Whedon thing in the universe. It's like a young kid talking like snappy, making jokes, like saving a girl.
Right.
And it's not even in the Whedon cut. It's the most Whedon thing ever, and it's only in the Snyder Cut. So that's that. I was just floored by that.
Yeah. Well, I think if it was a Whedon scene, there would have been some like accidental molestation or something in the middle of the Speed Force. There was enough of that kind of bad body humor included.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's sort of where. So you mentioning that, I think we should start with some history about, and maybe talk a little bit about. I want to know why there is such a negative impression of Zack Snyder.
Okay. Yeah.
And to go through some of the history on this, I think people really don't understand a few sort of key concepts in this. The first thing is that people don't realize why Snyder was pulled off of the Warner Brother, like why he was pulled off the original Justice League.
Mm-hmm.
I think people have this weird recollection that involves like Me Too and things like that, and they assume that Snyder was somehow pulled off because of Me Too.
Right.
When that was absolutely not the case.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, we were talking before the stream, but you mentioned that his daughter committed suicide.
Yes. Yeah.
And he had this big life event, and he's working on this DC movie, and he's just like not feeling it anymore. And the studio, who is feeling skittish about Snyder generally, uses that as sort of an excuse to pull him off the film, to sort of bring in Whedon softly.
Yes.
And then just basically antagonize Snyder until he quits.
Mm-hmm.
And so Snyder was not fired for any good reason. He wasn't even really fired for, I mean, he was eventually, like the real meat of it is that he was fired because he had creative differences with DC over the Justice League film. But it wasn't because he harassed anybody. It wasn't because there were any accusations.
Right.
It was simply a Hollywood thing that happens.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's a lot of really strange comparisons in the discourse between Whedon and Snyder.
Yeah.
And I do not understand that at all because, and in researching for tonight, I put together the timeline, and the timeline is incredibly interesting too. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But there is no comparison between Whedon and Snyder on this issue. Whedon has a documented history of harassing people, mistreating people, abusing people,
right,
and going back decades.
Yes. Yeah.
And Snyder does not. And if it happens to come out that Snyder has done those types of things, then yes, he should absolutely have repercussions for those things. But as far as I know, I've done a lot of Googling on this. I haven't found it. I have found actually the opposite, that you go look at what the actresses who made Sucker Punch say about him. Right. They, the actors that have worked with him, they really like him. And you and I both read the Vanity Fair piece about the history of the Snyder Cut, which is a good thing to read, but there's a line in that piece where they're like, he really Sucker Punch, which some say was misogynist. And it's like, there's a really, we really need to hash that out because it's not true. And I know that it's sort of, I say that very strongly, and maybe I shouldn't say it that strongly because I'm sure that some people feel that way. But the thing that I really don't like is, and when I mentioned pre-stream that I might cry, this is why I might cry, is because the erasure of women that work on his films is nuts. Like, his wife is a credited creative partner and producer on his films. The actresses that work with him consistently defend him. And the thing is that, you could say like, oh, they're just saying nice things about their boss. It's Hollywood. But it's like, well, no, this is the era of Me Too. And when we cancel Whedon because of things that actresses have said about him, we should also be crediting when actresses who work with Zack Snyder say that he has done good by them.
That's a very
and that he's a good creative partner to work with. And so when you say Sucker Punch is misogynist, I would really like you to go talk to Jenna Malone and Emily Browning, who had creative input on that film, and explain to them that they are doing a misogyny on it. Right. Because it really it doesn't make a lot of real sense when you actually dig into it.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think if you could point at anything, it may have been the initial marketing, how they kind of did pinups of the leading ladies, and so that had nothing to do. That's not Zack Snyder at all.
Right, exactly.
That's a marketing company and the studio's angle on how they want to push it at Comic-Con or where they think it's gonna. Yeah. Yeah,
but there's this whole thing where it really feels like people were primed in some way to dislike Zack Snyder, and that decision to dislike him and his films happened right after 300. and then it proceeded into Watchmen. Then with Sucker Punch, everybody was like, "See, we were right the whole time." And then people like threw away the key. And then later, now people remember it like, "Oh yeah, Zack Snyder got canceled way back when," and they're comparing him to Whedon, and it's like, no, you really should re-examine all of this in context.
Yeah, right.
Because none of that really happened that way, and especially the things about misogyny, and also, we should talk a little bit about, I think, Alan Moore. I think Alan Moore did a bad job in discussing adaptations of his work, and I understand why he feels the way he does about adaptations of his work, but I feel like it is difficult to take him seriously on his opinions on that, because he has a dog in this fight. He doesn't want you to watch the Watchmen adaptation. He wants you to go read the original comic.
Yeah.
He doesn't want you to watch 300. He wants you to go read 300, the comic. He doesn't like Christopher Nolan either.
Yeah.
He doesn't like he doesn't like any adaptation of his work. There is none that could ever happen that would please him.
Right.
And so when you cite to Alan Moore, you really need to be honest about what you're saying with that. And what you're saying is no adaptation. We don't want any film. And to me, that's just not, I don't think that that's valid. And especially when the critiques of Watchmen itself are basically, there's a sort of thing that happens with Zack Snyder that is sort of like necromancy of the author, which is to say that, like, if you know about like criticism, you know about death of the author,
right,
where it's like, oh, well, we really shouldn't think so much about what the author intended. We should read their works as self-containing, and we should think about ideas that they make us have, and not necessarily about what they intended. And so this is how you get, how we can read, things in the Cthulhu universe with not recoiling in terror about all the racism. It's just like, we understand the person who wrote this was hyper racist, right? But also we can look at these works as texts and evaluate them. And the thing with Watchmen that happens is that Snyder basically gets accused of misunderstanding Watchmen. Because he did a good job with the adaptation,
right,
the scenes that are violent, the scenes that are supposed to be violent are violent, and then also the scenes where people have sex are silly. He gets accused of he gets accused of not being in on the joke somehow. He really doesn't get it. He made this and it's kind of okay, but he really doesn't get it. And so on the one hand, people critique everything in the Watchmen film based on the idea that we can't really look at any of Zack Snyder's intention, because his intention was to do a faithful Watchmen adaptation, which I think he did. And then so it gets criticized on a layer that sort of presumes that he wasn't trying to do that. So that's sort of the death of the author step. And then so people are like, oh, and then also we don't like this film because it glorifies superheroes. Right. And it's like, well, you really should be looking at the Watchmen graphic novel here and seeing how that happened in that universe too. And then the necromancy of the author is when you then pivot to impugning the motives of the author after the fact. And so you have these steps where it's very clear where people criticize the Watchmen film, and then they invoke death of the author to say we don't really need to care about what Zack Snyder thinks, but then we're gonna put words in his mouth, right, and we're gonna criticize him for those words. And at that point, I become very angry. Because it's not a good, it really feels like you are trying to find things to be angry about at that point. And so I think, and for me, that's my opinion on the original sin that Snyder committed. And this also goes back to 300 with the claims of homophobia and things like that. Or it's or you get some people like Batman versus Superman is too gay. And it's I got news for you. Batman and Superman are kind of gay. It's just a thing in the comics. It's a dynamic. If it makes you feel a certain way, it's well, he's doing a good adaptation because that energy also exists in the comics. So if it's not gay in the film, then maybe they did a bad job. And so it's like, but also, why is your critique that they're either like homophobic or they're too gay or
Yeah.
I find that the criticism of Snyder's films is most of it is very strangely scattershot and like self-contradictory that in that way. And I think that people basically just took what Alan Moore said about Snyder's adaptations as gospel and sort of ran with it over the years, and it have just been primed to just not like him.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. What do you think about, so when he was kind of chosen to start the DC universe with Man of Steel, and had that kind of burden of the success of the Dark Knight trilogy, like the what Christopher Nolan had done, making it kind of more real world and dark. I mean, it's not difficult to make Batman dark, but to make it more grounded. Do you think that was something that fit well into what he was capable of doing, or do you think that was kind of an unnecessary kind of style that he had to work in to make those films?
No, I think that part was probably fine, and especially with the. I mean, I was in doing research for tonight, and we both read that Vanity Fair article. I was actually really surprised to hear like how far back the Nolan Snyder working relationship goes.
Yeah, that's true.
And that they basically both didn't really have a problem with it. They didn't have a problem with each other. Like they both really seemed to enjoy Batman as a character, and they both had ideas about it. And they, even when they had different ideas, it didn't really seem like they were bothered by the fact that somebody else had a different idea.
Right.
And so I don't think that was a big problem. I think in a lot of ways it was really helpful. For what Snyder was trying to do. And I also feel that way generally about the current DC cinematic universe, which is that without Nolan's take on it, we probably would not have gotten a Watchmen.
Yeah.
Like we would not have gotten a Dark Knight. We would not have gotten like, I mean, when I say like, if we hadn't gotten Batman Begins and it hadn't been successful, we don't get a Dark Knight.
Right.
We probably don't get Watchmen. Watchmen, doesn't exist, and so you don't understand that there's this market for R-rated comic book adaptations, which I think is really important to talk about too. And it was brought up a lot with when the Joker came out a few years ago. The key thing, the reason that R-rated adaptations are important is not because we want to see boobs or violence. It's because we don't need our comic book adaptations to be aggressively censored for a PG-13 global international audience. We would like them to be able to do the things that happen in the graphic novels.
Right.
And that's not possible under PG-13.
Yeah. No, that's true.
And so when these people are like, oh, they're just doing an R-rated superhero movie, what do they need to do that for? It's like, well, they need to do that because otherwise you don't get to do what you want to do. You don't get to show blood.
Right.
You don't get to show Wonder Woman, imploding a man. Like, you don't get to show those things.
Yeah.
You don't get to show the fact that, these villains are real villains that are killing people. You don't get to show a hand being severed with the Green Hornet. You don't get to show those things
right.
in a PG-13 film. And so R-rated comic book adaptations are extremely important for preserving the what we are used to coming from the graphic novel space.
Yeah. No, that's a really good
and
point.
So I really don't think that Snyder coming from Nolan's Batman universe was a hindrance. In a lot of ways, I think Snyder really only exists because Nolan did a good job with recontextualizing Batman into a more sort of real world scenario.
Right. Yeah, from the outside, I didn't quite know if that was like studio pressure, like, this made money, we're doing other superheroes, we want it to make money, keep it dark, follow that continuity, because they really hadn't established like they were going to do a DC universe, when with the success of the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, that wasn't a thing yet, and I think Iron Man.
In some ways, it's
Yeah.
still not a thing.
That's right. That's right. But it was, yeah. I was just curious about that, and if that became kind of a weird burden, or kind of had to, change some of the thinking or the strategy, and also the kind of the weird. I think this was definitely a studio thing, the kind of catch up, like storytelling wise, the catch up that those movies had to do, because we had to go from, Man of Steel to Batman trying to kill Man of Steel to, hey, now we've got a Justice League in 3 films, and if you look at what Marvel had done, before they even got to something as huge as that, they had 18 movies before they even got to their big, climactic battle with their Darkseid. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the bigger issue is that DC's ability to sort of pilot its cinematic universe was always less adept. That they were always playing catch up with Marvel, and what they had was basically like they actually sort of, in a lot of ways, the Marvel cinematic, like we're talking about, like, films that exist because of other films, like Batman Begins is kind of the reason that a lot of things start to pop off for big budget superheroes again.
Right.
And so maybe you don't get Iron Man unless Batman Begins happens.
No, that's a good point.
And for a while, Marvel was kind of behind too in how it was handling film rights. You saw this with Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And the reason that all of the Spider-Man things happen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is because there was a time when Marvel didn't care about film rights. And wasn't looking at it like that. And then they started to look at it like that, and they started to put somebody on it who was managing the entire universe itself as a film universe, and DC just didn't do that, it seems like. I mean, I'm sure they had a person who was in charge of it, but it feels like they kind of fell into it. Like they had first mover disadvantage. Like you hear about first mover advantage a lot of but actually in real business terms, most often being the first mover is a disadvantage because there's no market for whatever you're doing. You usually fail. You get some other big company starts doing what you did, but at scale or whatever, so you get screwed. And so DC had first mover disadvantage on Batman Begins, and then they stuck with Nolan, who did a great job on Dark Knight, did a less great job on the subsequent film, and then they also had Snyder from the Watchmen contract, and it was sort of like, well, these are the 2 people we've worked with. We've worked with Christopher Nolan, we've worked with Zack Snyder, so this is our universe, I guess, is these people. And I think what really happened when Snyder gets pulled off Justice League is I really think you have DC trying to take control of its universe from someone they felt had become too powerful.
Oh, yeah.
Because if in researching for tonight, I was very surprised by how much creative control and impact Snyder had on the DC cinematic universe. I forgot that he had actually first cast Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman for Man of Steel.
Yeah, right.
I even forgot that he did Man of Steel. Like I remembered Batman versus Superman and Justice League, but I forgot that he had done another another film in the universe. And so if you're from DC's perspective at this point, you have a former director who's helping produce these films with Zack Snyder, but DC's not giving Christopher Nolan work really at this point. And then because Nolan went on to do Inception, lots of Interstellar, lots of other things that are way bigger than DC will ever do. And then you've got Zack Snyder, who was still in the DC fold to continue working on the universe, and then he basically built everything we know of to be the current DC universe, except for maybe Suicide Squad. But still, like his impact looms large over the DC universe to the point where it's like it just doesn't exist without Snyder.
Yeah. That's a good point. They really got themselves into that situation because it was kind of a vision. You had those 3 films: Man of Steel, Batman versus Superman, and then Justice League, that would have had a consistent vision and a consistent kind of portrayal of those characters. And then they just decided to completely upend.
They blinked.
Yeah.
Like they saw what Marvel was doing, and rumors go around. Everybody knows what everybody's working on in Hollywood. And those Avengers movies, DC knew what was happening in those films before they were released, and knew that those things were going to be billions of dollars. And then they have a thing called Justice League in production, and they see Zack Snyder at the helm making not the thing that they would like it to be, and they're like, oh shit, if we don't step in now, we're going to lose $1 billion.
Yeah, yeah.
And it makes a lot of business sense for them to fire Zack Snyder and to bring in Whedon, who had worked on the MCU.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Was there also corporate maneuvers? Was Warner Brothers purchase? What was the? Because I know AT&T is involved in HBO Max. So was there? Because I had heard something about another thing that was motivating executive producers to get Justice League finished was there were bonuses involved. They needed to get it done
on time.
Yeah, yeah, and within what the original release was going to be.
Okay.
So that may have put pressure on the.
So for sure. Yeah, and probably previously when I was talking about DC, I probably, should have more accurately said sort of, the DC Warner Brothers
that
corporate pairing.
Right.
Because, so you're correct. Yeah, it's not all DC. There's Warner Brothers as well. But what I imagine is the case is similar to the MCU Spider-Man stuff, which is that these studios license these properties on a time basis.
Yes, right.
And they have to hit certain targets and milestones on certain dates. And if they don't, they have to pay fees, because the idea is that they eventually will get a percentage, but the companies that are licensing this stuff, they always want to guarantee that they will make their money. And so the idea is, like if Warner Brothers doesn't release Justice League and it comes out 6 months after it's supposed to,
right.
Probably in the contract, DC is still owed 6 months of box office percentage, or what would have been 6 months of box office percentage.
Right. Yeah.
And so, I'm certain that there's people at Warner Brothers like shitting a brick about the timeline that Justice League is being created on, and just having nightmares about having to write big checks to DC with no movie out.
Yeah.
And so, I'm sure that people in suits were just mortified by it, enough to bring in Whedon.
Right. Yeah, because I was thinking, with the timing of the release of those films, because the 2017 Justice League came out 6 months before Infinity War, and Infinity War was just like, a 15-year, process.
Sprawling epic.
Yeah, to build up to this moment where you could have 20-some characters in a movie, not have to introduce any of them because you've already seen them in all of their other films, and so that timing was really strange, and it really feels like if they could have figured out, wait until this they're going to shoot their wad, and they're going to be done. And things are going to be really cooling down, and a Justice League movie would attract a lot more attention because people were like, I want that feeling again, to be back in the teams together. They're taking on this biggest challenge, because, basically after that, Marvel starts from zero, and they just have to, and now we're going to build up this next phase of these characters and this new Avengers or whatever they're going to do. And so the timing felt really strange. So the timing of the Zack Snyder's Justice League would have been really perfect if they would have just let's slow down and let's do this, let's finish this now. It would have been amazing. I mean, it may not have actually been possible, business wise, but yeah.
I mean, and it's really down to Snyder having tragedy in his family, having to step away, and also being really harassed by the business people about the project. Like they sent minders to the set every day.
Right. Yeah. That was really disturbing.
To try to make sure he wasn't doing anything too crazy.
Yeah. You can make this a little funny. Want to put a little joke in here? I can't even imagine. Yeah. What that was.
It's so weird too, because ostensibly you have a script that the studio signed off on. Right. Mm-hmm. Like these people, when you make films, by the way, it's not just fly by the seat of your pants. Like, I know Judd Apatow might make some films that way.
Right.
Or claim that he does. But things are blocked out on schedules months in advance. The majority of a director's job is actually scheduling. And so is making sure that you can get camera crews on this date, sets on these dates when you need them, like making sure actors are in places. And then also you're coordinating this not just with your main film crew, but oftentimes you have what's called a second unit and a third unit, which are shooting smaller shots that don't have the main actors. Like if you ever see a film, you see somebody like open a door with a key, and there's a shot of the key going in the door. It's probably second or third unit.
Right.
Effects shots are commonly second or third unit. And so as a director, you're not just responsible for like, oh, your like fuzzy creative vision. As a director, you're primarily responsible for making sure everybody is where they're supposed to be and everything is happening on time.
Yes.
So the idea that the studio is sending somebody to watch the director to make sure like that things are happening on the day that they're supposed to be happening is like incredibly strange.
Yeah.
It's just like if you're in any other, it's like there's no equivalent in any other job. It's like if you were driving and your insurance company was like, we want somebody to be next to you in the passenger seat. We're also going to give them a steering wheel.
Yeah, right.
This is going to go well. We think this is going to work really well.
Right. Yeah, that's a good comparison. Yeah. It sounds like a lot of the executive thinking was very odd, and the other odd thing was the Sujiwara, the executive that they named. Yeah, he had to step down because of allegations, so he was so involved in the destruction of Justice League and then was out of the company because of his misbehavior. So that was really depressing, kind of reinforced my thinking. I have great respect for, I'm sure he's Japanese American, but Japanese creators, but I have not had ever much respect for Japanese executives.
Oh yeah. Not known for their courage.
Right.
You mentioned like what might have been, and I really think Zack Snyder's Justice League. One of the other things to really consider is that we still have not gotten Zack Snyder's cut of the theatrical release of Justice League.
Right.
Like we got the theatrical cut of Watchmen, and then we got a director's cut that had all of the Black Freighter stuff inserted, and it's a better film. It's a more complete film. It's more true to what the original graphic novel was. And but I still really like the original theatrical cut of Watchmen. It was very good. We never got the theatrical cut of Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Right.
We skipped right to director's cut.
Yeah, that's
like 3 or 4 years later. And so everybody's criticizing Zack Snyder's Justice League for, oh, it's so long or whatever. It's like, well, yeah, the man got pulled off the project, and then he got pulled back to do a director's cut that was like where he was told you could do whatever you want. And so, yeah, what he decided to do was longer than what an original cut would probably have been. The original cut probably would have been about 3 hours. But from what we know now about like what the executives were saying, they wanted 2 hours.
Yeah,
just
they
flat.
wanted to force 2 hours. Yeah.
And it's like, and a lot of people online, even the people that sort of like hate the Snyder Cut, are saying is like, yeah, you shave an hour off this, you got a good film. And it's like, yeah, in a lot of ways, I agree. But I have more patience for watching Zack Snyder films, and so I really like the 4-hour cut. I like that it breathes and there's time and there's lots of moments of characters talking to each other, and people sort of are criticizing the first half hour where it's like, oh, nothing happens, it's so slow in the first half hour. It's like, no, lots of things happen. Lots of characters tell Batman to fuck off. Right? That's great. Yeah,
that's true.
It's entertaining to watch Jason Momoa tell Batman to fuck off.
Yeah, and it really that movie, you realize, seeing the 4-hour cut, how much that movie needed to do. And so, because we hadn't had an Aquaman movie, there was no Flash movie. We had a Wonder Woman movie, a Superman solo movie, then Batman versus Superman. We never had a Ben Affleck Batman, so we hadn't like established what a Zack Snyder Batman is. So it all had to be taken from those pieces, those appearances and those interactions in those films. And yeah, once you get to Justice League, there's still so much that needed to be covered. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think the 4-hour Zack Snyder's Justice League cut does a good job with all that stuff. Like you get lots of time to learn about Cyborg. Like there's probably an hour of that film that's just Cyborg.
Yeah.
Like there's a whole Cyborg movie in that film if you just recut it as like a Cyborg only film.
Yeah, yeah.
Like there's like a whole extra DC Universe movie in the movie. Like, he really wanted to do right by these characters, and they all feel very different, and they're all played by different people with different vibes, and they bounce off each other, and in a way that is really nice to watch. And it's very different from, I think, what happened with the MCU films, which is sort of like every character in MCU kind of talks like Spider-Man.
Yeah, right.
It's like everybody's very quippy, and like it's like not everybody can be quippy. It's not, that doesn't make for a good film. And so to sort of wear my heart on my sleeve a little bit, I really love that about like the scenes with Flash and scenes with Cyborg and exploring all that stuff. And the Cyborg thing reminds me of something I didn't bring up when we were talking about sort of the history of people hating Zack Snyder and the Whedon stuff. But I looked up the timeline today on what happened with Whedon. And I was mentioning to you a few weeks ago, like, oh yeah, like we knew Whedon was kind of a creep because of this post that his ex-wife had written. And I looked at the timeline on that, and it was written in 2017, but it was written about 2 weeks after Ray Fisher, the character who plays Cyborg, lit up Joss Whedon about his behavior on set publicly.
Yeah.
So Ray Fisher and Zack Snyder's Justice League is the reason that we know Whedon is a creep.
Yeah.
Is like Ray Fisher puts his marker down, and then Whedon's ex-wife comes up 2 weeks later to say, yes, he is a creep. He abuses people on set, and he is generally abusive and manipulative. And then sort of crickets for a few years, and then we get Charisma Carpenter and Sarah Michelle Gellar and other people who've worked with Whedon over the years coming in to say like, oh yes, for sure. And so there's a lot of very strange takes on this, but and this really, I think, goes to, you know, the erasure of things that have happened. But I was really like, I was surprised to see that. I hadn't realized that had happened, and I feel really bad for the way that Ray Fisher gets treated in all of this, especially what happened like with people taking like screenshots out of context from trailers and things from the Snyder Cut and saying like, oh, this looks like fucking garbage. Yeah. It's like, it looks fine in motion. Like, I didn't think any of the CG was like super terrible. Like, we should talk more about that later. But Ray Fisher appeared to really like this film, liked working on it with Zack Snyder. Whedon got brought in, liked working on it a lot less after that, and was highly critical of it. And then, Whedon's ex-wife came in for backup for him, and then people just like didn't support him on it, and to the point where everybody kind of like, Whedon's kind of a creep, yeah, and then just sort of like let things roast for like 3 years. It's very strange.
Yeah. No, that really is. So, do you see this, because, you know, we kind of have these corporate forces and, you know, kind of money being made at the box office, these forces that coalesce to take Zack Snyder off of Justice League. But now we have these strange forces like a brand new streaming service that wants some notoriety and like things that brought together to make it possible for this director's cut to happen. Does this feel more like a victory, or is this just, it just happened to work out this way where the money and he got this control back, and it's not really a satisfying, how satisfying is this project, because we don't even know. And he's kind of really cut those questions off in interviews when he's doing promotion for Justice League about, so are we going to see more Zack Snyder? He's like, I can't, we're not even talking about that, because so that's the thing that, we got to go back and have a fuller kind of presentation of these characters and then where things can go, and we may never see any of these actors in any of these roles ever again.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question, and I think the answer to it sort of lies in some of the way that Hollywood tends to work, which is that, like, you mentioned, like, not knowing if you're going to see these people again or see people in these roles, and that's sort of a classic thing that used to happen a lot in films. You would see a movie, it would end on a cliffhanger, but then nobody was contracted for a second or a third.
right.
Famously, Back to the Future.
Right.
Couldn't bring back Crispin Glover. Brought some version of Crispin Glover back.
When you hung him upside down, you couldn't tell the difference.
You couldn't tell, and got sued into oblivion on it.
Right.
And so it used to be a thing where it's nobody's contracted, and then also people used to be a lot less. They used to sound a lot more like Zack Snyder about are you going to be doing more? It's I don't know. Maybe I would love to. Yeah, I'm sure he doesn't go that far because he's got to bargain a contract. But you're going to hear a lot of, would you like to do another? And the answer is going to be, yeah, probably, if they let me. And but then also he's got to bargain a contract, so he's not going to say out the gate yes, I would love to, and they would have to drag me screaming to not. And it's because if you got an agent, it's they got to be able to get you money for it,
right,
to get you paid. So but the other end of that though is that if you've gotten one contract, the likelihood of getting another contract is probably high. And I don't know if they had to sign a new contract with Snyder to do this new cut, but given that it involved new shooting, I'm assuming that they must have gotten a new contract, which means that Zack Snyder has signed a contract with people in the past 2 years.
Yeah.
And if that can happen, if he can be brought back to do this, then I think that, if Zack Snyder wants to, and if the executives want it to happen, then that we could see more of the Snyder DC universe.
Yeah. I'm wondering though, with a streaming platform, how easy it is to measure the success of Zack Snyder's Justice League cut, because box office returns and things are much more something that Hollywood can understand. And basically, I think this project was being used, to kind of, streaming is an online thing. It's for people that are online a lot and use their entertainment is online based. So this really, the hashtag release the Snyder Cut crowd, this is really pandering to them and really saying, and you got to try HBO Max because this is the platform for you. And I wonder if the money that was invested, for its HBO Max release is just being seen as promotion and brand building for that streaming platform, and they don't, so how are they going to measure whether this was successful or not? Yeah,
so I think that one of the things you mentioned there is sort of the fan base clamoring for it, and while I think it's difficult to imagine this happening without the fan base clamoring for it, I really think that people overestimate the degree to which that was important for executives. Because like you said, you can get these kinds of followings on Twitter with thousands of people, but when it comes to big budget Hollywood releases, you need millions of people to go and get into seats in movie theaters or purchase a thing. The degree is just very different. And so having a few thousand people is it shows there is interest. It doesn't show that they're going to be able to make the kind of money they want to make.
You could take that to Kickstarter, probably.
Well, that's the reason Kickstarter exists, right?
Right.
Is that
lower, smaller scale? Yeah.
Right. When you can get a few thousand people to donate or to give $50 each, turns out you can hire half of a programmer for a year, and and get a third of a game done.
Yes.
So these things always cost more money than people think is the joke there. But yeah, so the way that the executives probably look at this, and this is gonna be a prediction. I'm gonna put on my prediction hat here, which is just a beer on my head. Is that DC and Warner Brothers saw Birds of Prey do well in the interim, post Justice League theatrical cut, post Whedon being canceled. You see the Joker,
right?
You see Birds of Prey do well, even after, by the way, Suicide Squad was panned,
Oh,
Just
right.
nobody has a nice, except for me. I love Suicide Squad, by the way. Just that's a different podcast, but I really like that movie. But nobody has a nice thing to say about Suicide Squad. Everybody liked Birds of Prey. That movie got great reviews. You know, people have a lot of problems with Wonder Woman, but those films are doing well. And so what I imagine is that DC and DC sees the end basically of the MCU finally, and sees an option here. And so you get stuff like, you got, you know, the Batman, which doesn't appear, it's not related to the Snyder universe directly. It's related to the, you know, the Todd Phillips, the Joker universe or whatever, but it's an R-rated take on, that's in the DC universe still. And so you see projects like that do well post Justice League, and then now that the MCU is ending, I really feel like the executives see an opportunity to continue, hopefully, the DC cinematic universe. And so I really think, and in the Vanity Fair article, they point out that the Flash film is in production, and like that's going to be interesting because, like you said in the chat when we were chatting, like DC really leans on its multiverse, and when you said that, I was like, what does that mean? Doesn't MCU also? And then I didn't realize that what you were actually talking about at the time was like, no, the thing about Marvel is that all of the canonical versions of the characters interact at the same time. The thing about DC Universe is that all of the versions of the characters exist at the same time. And so the Red Sun Superman can go meet the Superman we know. And then also in the Flash film, I guess it's rumored that Michael Keaton is going to reprise his role as Batman and interact with Ben Affleck's Batman or whatever. And so like you can do a lot of really cool stuff there. And so I think that my prediction is that we will see a relaunching of the DC universe, probably involving the Flash film, maybe another Wonder Woman movie, probably, I would hope, a new Justice League film with Zack Snyder directing. I think it's highly likely we will see another Justice League film with Snyder directing announced in the next year.
Wow.
Based on what executive chose to let Snyder do on this cut, especially with that 30-minute ending scene. It sets up a Birds of Prey 2 in a way that, like, it's very strange to watch a film that's referencing a film that existed before it itself came out. Or, the opposite. Referencing a film that existed after it came out. Like, it's so weird. Because, like, that line doesn't happen if you don't have a Birds of Prey movie, probably. And the line I'm talking about, by the way, just to be very clear about this, is that Batman talks about wanting to kill the Joker because of Harley Quinn dying in his arms. And it's like, well, we haven't seen that happen, I don't think. And it's like, that could happen in the potential Birds of Prey 2, or you get, so like a Suicide Squad 2 or something, or whatever DC wants to do with its villains. Like we could get some sort of villain centric version of Justice League, which is not unheard of in the comics, So I would think that. So your original question was like, how do you gauge success? And my feeling is that they are not looking to gauge success on this specific project. They're looking to hype people about the DC cinematic universe, and that this is a rounding error in a marketing budget that's going to be like $1 billion for the entire universe over the next 10 years. And that this is them getting back into it after really faltering with bringing Whedon on to finish Justice League, and then later people liking the Todd Phillips Joker movie, and then also liking Birds of Prey. Is that this doesn't need to do well. It just needs to have buzz, and it seems to have buzz, and people apparently seem to hate it. But I just, people claim they hate Watchmen, but that film did well.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I wonder if we're going to get an IMAX Japanese release of Justice League. That would be...
Oh, man.
We could, because, those are other markets and those are other deals to be made. So, sorry, we don't mean to rub it into anybody watching in Europe or North America, but it is possible.
I'll say by the time this thing is actually in a theater in IMAX, the vaccines will have been a thing. And so I'm pretty sure that if you see a theatrical release, it will be in IMAX, and it's probably going to be. You'll see it in major cities in America. You'll probably see it in New York and LA. It's unclear. I don't think we'll ever see a Japanese IMAX release of it.
Yeah, yeah.
In IMAX, no. I just don't. I don't know. I mean, that's one of those things that now that it's out there, I would like to see that. Like if I was an executive, I'd be like, yes, let's do this. It's a lot of fun. Like,
right.
But I don't see it happening because I don't think the numbers make sense on it. Because the thing that is, I mean, I guess you could do IMAX digital. Like the thing that I'm thinking of is that IMAX is fucking expensive.
Yeah, yeah.
Like those prints, man, are because it's double the size of a normal film negative.
Right, right.
Out the gate, and then it's also 4:3. So it's like not only is it double the size of a normal film negative, and then it's also 65% bigger than you think it is because it's in 4:3. So,
right.
And then you've got all the sound stuff, and you got shipping, and you just like,
yeah, it's
like normal film prints cost like, 15, 20 grand or whatever. It's like IMAX is like, I don't even know what IMAX is, but just distribution costs are
that's
insanity. But there is IMAX digital, so I don't know. I would hope that it happens, but I would think that it will not happen. I'm not even sure it's going to come out in the States in IMAX.
Yeah. That would be nice. But yeah, I think you're right too, and especially it seems like Marvel has the bigger presence here. Anyhow, yeah, there's not that same kind of promotion. But to dream. But yeah, I hefted cans at a Cineplex of film, so I can't even imagine what IMAX weighs because already just the 35 weighed a ton. Yeah, those were elbow bending, back bending cans. So yeah. Oh.
Yeah, and that IMAX thing is a funny question. That's sort of going back to the sort of scattershot approach to people criticizing Snyder. Is like Christopher Nolan was criticized up and down for his opinion that like he made Tenet to be screened in IMAX at the beginning of the pandemic was like, I still would kind of like people to see it in IMAX because it's my creative vision.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, Christopher Nolan, you're killing people. And then Snyder releases this on streaming services, and nobody's given Snyder credit for compromising his vision to do that, to show people the cut.
That's true. Yeah.
And it's like, well, it just feels like if you're criticizing somebody the one way, then maybe somebody else should be credited the other way who makes the opposite choice.
But those aren't clickbaity headlines. You can't be positive in your reporting.
Is it even headlines? It's just sort of like, like I said, it's just like rampant hot takery. And you get these weird hyperbolic things where it's, you have, Felix Biederman joking about like self-harm at the thought of having to watch the Snyder Cut. And it's like, dude, have you even ever seen a bad movie? Like, probably not. Like, you say you like Hard Target or whatever, but I'm going to clue you in. Like, or you've seen The Room or whatever. It's like, yeah, well, no, you consider those low quality, but you still like them, which means you enjoy watching them, which means, no, you probably haven't seen a bad movie. In which case, I would recommend, if you'd like to see a bad film, Le Divorce with Kate Hudson.
Oh.
It's a bad film. You should see it if you want to know what a bad film feels like. The Room is not a bad film. And so other films that frequently get trotted out is like, oh, this is so bad, we love it. It's just, no, that still made you feel something and you still liked it in some way. No, you need to watch a film that will make you feel bad the entire time.
That's an anti-recommendation from us to you.
Just watch it so you can recalibrate your hot take machine. Because, you can be bored by the Snyder Cut. That's fine. You don't even have to like the Snyder Cut. But don't pretend that it's sort of something that it's not. Just like, please engage with it at least.
Yeah. Do you think anybody else is going to be looking at this and thinking about doing things differently, or anybody will be more inclined? Because so many directors and film exhibitors, theater chains are just they can't believe that there's, Disney Plus is just going to, or Disney's going to be releasing things on Disney Plus. HBO Max is still planning to do simultaneous releases. Do you think this is going to change any of that? I mean, we're in the middle of all kinds of change, though, because movie theaters may be opening partially. Yeah, we don't know what things look like, but I'm wondering what impact the Zack Snyder Cut is going to have, and you're releasing something this big and this kind of exclusively, if it never does get to theaters.
Yeah, I think we'll eventually get like a Blu-ray release of this.
Yeah.
I think we'll get like a 4K Blu-ray of this, and that will be really nice. But like with the way that things happen with movie theaters, you see a lot of people saying like, "Oh, movie theaters are dead," or like, "Oh, they're going to reopen." But from a business perspective, I think the thing that has happened with the pandemic is that the sort of theater cartel has been broken. Studios have finally been able to break it. And for a long time, studios were sort of working in conjunction with the theater owners to keep things the way they were, because it was pretty useful. Like if you can get people to pay between $8 and $20, depending on where you are, to go sit in a room and watch a film, like that's pretty good. Like per person. You're getting that money per person.
Right.
Whereas like you sell a DVD for, $11 or whatever, a Blu-ray for $25 or whatever, it's like, well, 3 or 4 people could watch that at a time. It's like we're losing money, So it's like you have a streaming service. It's like you could pile 12 people on this couch and watch the whole thing, and nobody's paying. And so it's like the UFC thing or whatever, like pay-per-view. Like and so like the studios, they like, to a certain extent, they like theaters because they allow them to get very quick upfront returns on their films. And then basically what happens is that the entirety of the film is expected to make its budget and its marketing budget back in the theaters, and then the studio owns the long tail on it.
Right.
They own the international rights for whichever markets it didn't release simultaneously in, and then they also own the rights to streaming and DVD, Blu-ray, and so. That's why a lot of times you see films that are sort of like, oh yeah, this film didn't do well at the box office, and you're like, oh, it made $200 million or whatever, and it's like, well, it cost $150 million to make, but then also it had a $100 million marketing budget. So from the studio perspective, and yes, it will eventually make its money back, but studios don't want that. They want a cycle where they're in the black as soon as possible after a film releases. And so with the pandemic happening, they're probably not happy that they don't have those quick streams of money anymore, and so they had to burn a bunch of films. Right. But also for a long time, the excuse for why we didn't see stuff on streaming sooner, or earlier releases of like Blu-rays and things like that, was always like, oh well, theater distributors would be angry if we did these things too quickly, and so it's sorry, there was a year lag, and it came out in the theater in Japan a week ago, even though it came out a year earlier in the U.S., and so no, you can't have a Blu-ray right now. It's like Disney was big for that with Pixar movies. Like you'd have a summer Pixar release that wouldn't release in Japan until a holiday, and it was a very strange situation. But so the thing that has happened with the pandemic is that studios have finally been able to put the knife into the sort of cartel around theaters. But that doesn't mean there's no market for theaters. What that means is that most people are probably going to watch more films on streaming and Blu-ray first. But then you will still have these boutique kind of experiences like at Alamo Drafthouse or IMAX that will probably exist until the end of time. Because all of those are built on people paying a lot more money than a normal like matinee ticket price at a multiplex. Basically, like the multiplex is dead. Or like you're at most you're going to see like IMAX 4 screens or whatever. The multiplex is probably going to be dead because of the pandemic in most places. Like it may come back like hopefully it comes back. Like everything may come back as it was, but I doubt it. But I just think that more things are going to go to streaming first, and that you'll see the continued existence of these of things like IMAX and like very really upper echelon sort of in-person theater experiences at places like Alamo Drafthouse. And in Japan, by the way, almost all theaters are of the sort of Alamo Drafthouse variety, kind of already out the gate. Like you pay a lot of money to see a film in Japan.
Right.
You can buy beer.
Yeah,
It's not a thing. Like it's sort of like, it's almost like, but the thing is, it's not really any better than the American multiplex in like, at least in like, if you go to see a film at a multiplex in Times Square, like it's basically the same as seeing it in Japan, except you can buy a beer.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's probably going to be the direction that takes, and being able to see a film in person is going to become more of a luxury kind of experience.
Yeah, no, I
for
think
better
so.
or for worse.
Right.
Like in some ways that's good because it democratizes the access to the content. In some ways that's worse because if you have a film like Tenet or you have a film like Justice League, which was meant to be seen in IMAX, these are experiences that are harder to have well in your home.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. And so, yeah, I guess we talked a little bit about the epilogue already, like, what they saw and what they showed. And one of the things that was a little confusing about that, talking, because we had flashes of that. Oh, sure.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay, yeah. Sure. Yeah, we had flashes of the, that I think what Zack Snyder was calling like their dark vision, or that dark universe with, Batman and the duster and the goggles with a rifle, and like, the death of Lois Lane, causing Superman to turn against our heroes. But the thing that was odd about that for me is I think in the actual comics, like what that was inspired by seemed to be, I think that storyline was the Injustice video game, the fighting game.
Right, yeah.
The DC fighting game. And I don't know which came first. I don't know if that storyline was in the comics or if they made that storyline to have an excuse to have, heroes fighting each other, to like, build up two sides of heroes to fight each other with, and put, kind of mixing villains and heroes. Or if that, and so that was interesting that was the inspiration for what was happening in that setting, what was happening for the, the world that Darkseid succeeded in destroying. And so you had a post-apocalyptic view of that. And so I wonder if we do get another Justice League, are we getting that? Are we getting a mixture? Are they going to mix timelines? Are they going to, I guess it all depends on, what they decide to do in the Flash movie, if they're going to lead up to those sorts of things. But, the epilogue made me want things even more that I felt like I'm never gonna have. So that was an odd thing. And some of that, they said that some of that was unapproved. That was just like the Joker's inclusion and thing. Zack Snyder did that, and that wasn't anything that they actually went, with the studio. They didn't review with the studio that those were shot, in kind of quick pickups on green screens.
Yeah, you say you were disappointed by it. For me, I was really excited by it. Like I felt like, oh, this is hope. Like,
yeah.
Like I was so I'm not a super big DC fan or anything, but and I'm not even like, I'm the foremost Zack Snyder scholar in the Kyoto, Kobe, Osaka triangle that is half Polish, half German, and half Jewish, that is also transgender. So so when Snyder got pulled off of the film, and then he's not doing films, like I was pretty sad. And I watched Sucker Punch recently, and people don't like that movie, and I understand why they don't like that movie, but I really love that movie. That movie is great. And so, yeah, I was really sad. And so when I saw that epilogue, I was like, oh, we might get more. Like I was like, oh, Snyder might be able to do more in this universe now. Like we might finally be able to continue down this path. And you're mentioning sort of like in that epilogue, you see that, Superman's been turned. But I didn't really read that as being sort of as being a Superman turns on Justice League. I viewed that as, and I think this really comes down to a lot of the intentionality and things that are done in the Snyder DC film universe, which is like Batman is an asshole for a certain reason, and the reason he's an asshole is to set up Justice League.
Yeah, yeah.
And so and I think that, and so when you follow the course of characters through his films in the DC universe, you see characters that exist, like, it's like, oh yeah, it's an interesting choice. But then you see that, oh wait, this interesting choice actually makes more interesting things happen later. Mm-hmm. And like, because Batman's an asshole, it is now hard for him to get the people together to be the Justice League.
Right.
And then also he has his own regret of how he interacted with Superman. Like, where he's like, oh, all this shit's my fault, I gotta fix it. Which is a very like human emotion. And so my read on the epilogue is that bringing people back with the box has consequences. And one of those consequences might be that, yeah, for the moment, that things with Darkseid have subsided on Earth. But that later, like, Superman might not be fully back in the way that we know, like, we would like him to be back. He might not be the same as he was before. Right. Which is also a thing that happens with Cyborg. It is just sort of like he's pissed.
Yeah.
Like, he was not happy to be brought back with the power of the box. And he had very stern words for his father for doing so. Yeah. And so if there's anything about the Snyder sort of DC film universe stuff, I would say it's that, like, presuming intentionality is probably better than presuming that things are incidental. And so my read on the epilogue was, yeah, like, that eventually there's going to be a downside to having brought Superman back. And there's going to be a further problem, and Batman is going to further continue to be the cause of everyone's pain.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Was that in the Vanity Fair article where they talked about the love triangle that they didn't do?
They had planned for Lois.
And, they're gonna.
Yeah, that was in the Vanity Fair article. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a possibility that before the resurrection of Superman, Batman and Lois Lane were going to be involved, and then the guilt, Batman's guilt for, focusing on, or I guess, like, Amy Adams never, not Lois Lane, played by Amy Adams, never giving up on her love for Superman makes Batman realize he has to bring him back. Like, he has done something much bigger. So it's funny that to put that in romantic terms, if they would have done that instead of him seeing, what he had done to the planet or what he had done to, kind of fate of
I was when I read that was the plan, I was really disappointed that didn't happen, because Lois Lane in this movie feels very vestigial. Yeah. Like, it feels like she could just be cut, and so it would make her inclusion in the story make sense, and it would give further dynamic for those characters. And so so yeah, like, I think, like, I know people would say, like, oh, you're just introducing, like, a melodramatic kind of element, which, yeah, but also, like, it is weird, like, the energy in the Snyder Cut is weird because there really is no romantic arc for anybody at all. Like, not even Lois and Superman. Like, Lois and Clark, they don't, like, it's sort of like, yeah, she mourns him and then he comes back and they're kind of happy, but like, they don't seem like super happy to be back with each other. It's just like, oh, I guess things are back the way they were. Right. It's a weird vibe. So it would have been nice to have, but also I also think that's why it's important that bringing Superman back with the box has consequences, because if it is the case that is the route that they take, well, then there's going to be conflict then between Lois and Clark, because Lois is going to be the first person to notice that Clark is changed. Right. And so yeah, like, but yeah, it is. I really wish that had happened, because that would have been really interesting, and we did not get to see that. But I did think that some of the scenes between, like, Wonder Woman and Batman were kind of funny in weird ways,
Mm-hmm.
and then like Alfred and Wonder Woman like making tea
Yeah,
and things
right.
like that. Just sort of a weird thing.
Yeah.
Just I like that those small moments.
Mm-hmm.
I liked Billy Crudup as Barry Allen's father.
Yeah.
It was so nice, just like because there's like I really liked his performance in Watchmen,
Mm-hmm.
and that whole sequence where they introduced Dr. Manhattan in Watchmen is just like it's a great short film on its own.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like you could just clip that 15 minutes and it's an incredible short film.
Mm-hmm.
And the narration in it is just so perfect. And
Yeah,
it's so like, and people, it's, oh, he's just being emotionless. But it's like, yeah, but that takes a lot of work actually, and he does it well.
Yes. Yes.
And it's sad.
Yeah. Yeah. His performances. Yeah. That's true.
And I don't want to be sort of melodramatic myself, but people talk about the first 15 minutes of Up, for example,
Mm-hmm.
of there are sequences in films that are kind of self-contained that can be extremely sad and give a lot of backstory for a character very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And Billy Crudup was able to do that in Watchmen, and I feel similarly that the scene with him and Barry Allen talking about what he thinks Barry Allen should do and giving the reason for why Barry Allen's going to try to do all these things was like extremely effective.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, like that was nice to see.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the inclusion of the kind of grudge and the tension between Atlanteans and Amazons.
Yeah.
That was good too, because we hadn't really how they decided to kind of say Wonder Woman was in seclusion and stuff in the 2017 cut. I think that it worked much better to just say, yeah, the reason that this was the last time, thousands of years ago was the last time that humanity and the heroes had ever cooperated, and this is the first time we've ever. Representatives of our groups have actually ever been together to do anything. Yeah, so I like that inclusion.
Yeah, and that's a very human kind of story.
Yeah.
Like just having ancient grudges and stuff, and people being like, "Oh, I don't like those people." Why? Well, we don't know. Like,
It's
like,
just how it is. Yeah,
don't like them. Like,
Right.
like Adidas and Puma. Go look that up, by the way. If you've not looked up the Adidas Puma beef, it is real. Have you not?
I have not.
Okay,
Yeah.
you should look it up.
Okay.
It's crazy. It's insane.
Is it European football related, or is it what is?
It predates.
Oh. All right.
Basically, so Adidas is called Adidas because it was started by a guy named Adi Dassler. And he had a brother.
Mm-hmm.
His brother started Puma
Oh.
in the same town.
Okay. now it makes
And
sense.
the people who worked
Wow.
at the different places in the town,
Mm-hmm.
going back generations, have a generational beef that they tried to quash over the years by doing like yearly soccer games.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
but people still remember. Like you go into the town, people are like, yeah, we're an Adidas family. No, we're a Puma family. Yeah, we're an Adidas family. Like people know. Like you're marked. It's like
Yeah.
it's like the way cops talk about gangs. It's like
Right. Yeah.
So yeah. The beef between like it's dwarves and elves and Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Like these are things that make sense in fiction. And yeah, that's a great angle to take.
Yeah.
And that's also part of my theory on the box having consequences is just like look at any fiction where somebody is brought back from the dead.
Yeah.
It's never goes well.
Right.
Frankenstein,
Pet Cemetery.
Pet Cemetery, Lost.
Yeah.
It's never good. So yeah.
Oh, that's good. Wow. Yeah. This has been really fun. Is there anything we haven't covered? So the thing that during the promotion for Justice League, Zack Snyder was talking about Army of the Dead, and I didn't know anything about that. And then I saw that it was going to be a Netflix series. It's like a project for Netflix. I don't know if it's going to be a movie or lead into that, but I'm curious to see what.
Yeah, I'm not certain
what
about that. I'm sure that it's going to be similar to how. Remember how like there was that show that true crime show on Netflix about the serial killers, Mindhunter.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That was like, the first episode's done by David Fincher.
Right.
I would assume that the Army of the Dead is similar to that.
Yeah.
Where it's going to be like he's going to be executive producer. He's going to probably pick showrunners. He's probably going to do the first episode, and then after that, he may be a little bit more hands off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, who's the guy who did Lost and Star Trek and all that?
The writer?
No, not the writer. The producer. The guy who everybody blames for everything now.
Yeah, that's doing he's producing television now. Yeah. I'm blanking.
He did Mission Impossible. Anyway, it's similar to how that J.J. Abrams.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So Lost gets flagged as a J.J. Abrams show, right?
Right.
And he did the first episode, and he was executive producer. And he had a lot of input in the first season. But that was not really his baby. Like that was Damon Lindelof and Carlton Cuse. By the way, so when you criticize things, you gotta get it right, okay? And J.J. Abrams may have done a bad job on stuff, but he's not to blame for all of Lost. Okay, just by the way, right? Lost was good, and then also bad for other reasons.
Yeah, tune into our Lost live stream.
Anyway, just thinking about like people bringing people back from the dead reminded me of Lost, and then you mentioning the Snyder deal for Netflix for Army of the Dead. Yeah, I would assume it's something like J.J. Abrams on Lost or David Fincher on Mindhunter. Is that it's gonna be one of those things, right? Yeah, he has input, but is not gonna be making all of it himself.
Yeah, interesting. Well. Yeah, well, that's good. So, are you capable of watching Justice League again? Are you capable of getting through those 4 hours?
But the Snyder Cut again?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll definitely watch it again.
So, would we be able to do a commentary?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
If we watched it again?
Oh.
Okay. I think that would be fun. That might be something fun to include in a patron-only kind of situation.
Yeah,
but,
I would definitely be up for that.
Yeah, because I think like seeing certain scenes and stuff, I think will trigger other stuff that we didn't get to in this discussion.
Oh, for sure. There's like it's in thinking about what we might talk about tonight. It's really unfortunate that we have to spend so much time talking about like the history and like Whedon and all of that stuff, because it's like this film has just sort of like the discourse around it has become discourse itself and swallowed all of us. Yeah. And it's sad because the film isn't that bad. Like it's fine. It's aggressively okay. Like it's fine. Like I'm not gonna say I really like love it. I loved a lot of it, and I had a lot of good feelings while I watched it. But yeah, I think there's a lot of things to say about it that we don't get to say on in this podcast or video, because we just have to talk about everything else first.
Right.
And so doing a commentary and watching it in the moment, I can complain about the bad CGI.
Yeah.
When the Steppenwolf attacks the Amazonians. Like there's a lot of rubbery horses in that.
Taking a beating. Those horses. Yeah.
And there's not an opportunity to talk about that stuff because
and
it's a 4-hour film.
Right. Yeah, well, we were trying to do a 4-hour live stream. We want every time we talk about it to at least have there was no intermission though. I guess that's the problem with this discussion. But because I'm curious about, as we watched the film, like things like Wonder Woman thwarting the kind of terrorist attack at the beginning. It seems like because there was the Wonder Woman film, not a Zack Snyder Wonder Woman film, she moved in the Wonder Woman movie way, not a Zack Snyder way. When like there was no slow down, speed up, and there wasn't focus on certain action. She moved like other movie Wonder Woman. There's some interesting choices that were made. Yeah.
When I mentioned like intentionality, that is one of the things that really bothers me. Is that there's that little girl in that scene who's like, I want to be just like you someday.
Right.
And she's like, you can. And I think people don't realize that Snyder is capable of being sarcastic and that he knows Diana is a shitty person with privilege. And that is a thing that the Gal Gadot DC universe film universe Wonder Woman would say, and also we should hate it. We should be like, no, that's bullshit.
Patently untrue.
just fucking bogus. It's like, girl, you did not grow up on the special island.
Right.
Like, you don't have the things. It's like, you are sorry, you can't. And so, and I feel like Snyder knows that, and he's trying to make her less likable by having her, actually kill somebody, and then say that thing to the girl, like, you can be just like me. You can murder a terrorist when you could easily disarm him. Like, right. And then Batman's lying about when Barry Allen asks him, like, what's your superpower? He's like, I'm rich. I'm a billionaire.
Right.
It's like, yeah, like, yeah, it turns out. Like,
with a grudge, rich with a grudge. Yeah.
Yeah, so like we could, those are things that we could talk about a lot more on the commentary.
Yeah. That would be fun. I think that would be really fun to do. And it'd be, I'd like to go through that again and kind of, just react to things and also include things, because it's going to suggest things that we read about that,
It's going to be really tough though, because the film really doesn't have any downtime. There's going to be no time for us to talk.
Right. We're going to be shouting above. Nice. All right. Well, I think we did it. We have... so that was our discussion of Zack Snyder's Justice League, which released on HBO Max, and I have no idea, like, internationally, what they're going to do with that as far as like digital rights. I haven't seen any hint of it coming to any other platforms or anything. And HBO Max is North America, right? Or does it have any international?
I think it does have an international arm, because, but I also think it's impossible to say, because it just depends on what the studio contract with HBO is.
Right. Yeah.
So like you could look at what HBO did with Game of Thrones, but it's like, well, that was a co-production with BBC or whatever, and then also just worldwide rights got split. And so, like, if you wanted to watch that in Japan, you had to, like, swap between different networks every season.
Right.
And that happened with Fargo recently, how it was on Netflix in Japan for 3 years, and then the newest season is on some paid streaming service now in Japan. And so it's like, internationally, that thing is going to, like, sort of, be dispersed into the wind. Like, nobody... And then also, it's just going to continue to come to more stuff, because HBO, I'm sure, has an exclusive, timed exclusive in some way, but it's not permanent.
Right.
So at some point there's going to be a Blu-ray release probably, I would hope. And then also it's going to probably come to any other streaming service too, probably. So
nice. Yeah, so I guess, since we talked most about everything around the production of the film, this is kind of a spoiler-free. I guess we everyone knows that Superman died.
I didn't know that. When that happened, I was like, and also when Barry Allen was like, everybody's thinking the same thing, right? I'm like, I don't know what he's thinking. And then Cyborg put Superman on top of the box, and I was like, oh my God, they're going to bring back Superman. Oh my God. I had no idea. Like, just because, Superman's dead, by the way. But like, I didn't know that he got brought back.
Yeah, I can't, I have a lot of trouble getting my head around watching the Snyder Cut without having seen the 2017. That's interesting, because I was just that's not there, this is here, this is different.
I should have known, because I remember the story going around, everybody making fun of the Whedon reshoots with Henry Cavill having to CGI out his mustache for all the Whedon reshoots. And I remember hearing about that, but I think in my head I was like, oh, maybe that was like a Batman versus Superman thing, or like I just never put it together. And then also, like, Superman's in the beginning of the movie, right? Because you see him die again. So, like, it's like, he's in the film. Like, and so I was just like, I had no idea that they were going to, like, bring him back like that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, a really ironic thing would have been, because I think in the comics, The Death of Superman, when he comes back, he's kind of got a mullet and a beard. And Zack Snyder said, I would have loved to have done that, but they probably would have had a CGI. That onto him because of the time restraints and probably whatever else he was working on. So they took a mustache off,
add a beard,
add a beard later. Yeah, that would have been hysterical. But the mullet was missed. We got the black costume. That was the rebirth of Superman.
All that ship stuff was really good, man. Just they really tied certain bits of that movie together in a way that is very satisfying, just like Cyborg, and then his father working on the alien technology and interacting with Superman's ship, and Superman going back to the ship, and then like that's all very just it's like when I talk about intentionality, that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. It's like it's very easy to think that everything in these films happens accidentally. Then it's also easy to like go completely nuts and say like everything is intentional, which is not true. But there are you got to give credit where credit is due. And when the story sort of hangs together like that, I find all those things really satisfying because, you know, in Spielberg films, you have these things where it's like Minority Report, where it's like there's this thing that Tom Cruise and his son in that movie, it's like they have like a family motto they share, where like always keep running or whatever it is, or like just keep swimming or whatever. And it's like, you know, when the character says that thing, it's going to come back later in the movie.
Right, right.
Whereas in a proper film for adults, when things like the ship get introduced, you don't know that you're going to see Superman later walk through it again.
Yeah.
And that's satisfying when those things happen. So,
yeah. Just keep swimming. Nice. I wonder if this is, I mean, depending on what the relationship ends up being with Warner Brothers and Zack Snyder in the future, I wonder if they're going to go back and look at Man of Steel and Batman versus Superman and see if there's stuff that hit the cutting room floor that may, you know, flesh things out, so we might get like extended releases of those films as well. If this brings that back, if this brings interest back to,
I think that could happen. I would like to not see that happen because if that's happening, it means Snyder's not working on Justice League 2.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Yeah.
And like, yeah, people can work on different projects at, you know, the same time or whatever, but it's like, no, that's the thing that they would do if they're gonna burn this as like a one-off series of projects instead of being the thing that launches the second act of the DC film universe. So so like I just like it would be interesting to see that like as a viewer, but as someone who knows how these kinds of projects get made, it would be like, oh, this only exists because we don't get other things we want more.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's a good point.
Probably. Like they could just do everything. It's a possibility.
Right. We have Zoom now,
have Zoom.
Yeah, you can put everything
like,
in a window.
Realistically, I think not.
Yeah.
And also, he's probably. I feel like Zack Snyder's probably happy with those films.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
In a way that he was never gonna be able to be happy with the 2017 Whedon release of Justice League that he's never seen.
Right.
That I've never seen either.
But
By the way, I'm Zack Snyder.
I'm Christopher Nolan. Because he has.
Did you watch that video?
No, I didn't.
Oh man, you need to watch the Joker Pennywise video.
Yeah.
It's these two French guys dressed up. One of them's dressed up as Joker. One of them's dressed up as Pennywise, and they see each other on the train. And the guy who's like Pennywise is like Joker, and the guy who's playing Joker's like Pennywise, and it's like a 40-second video where they're just going back and forth like, oh my god, it's you.
Excellent.
Mon Dieu.
And the French probably makes
It's very good. You should watch it. But that's so I sent you the picture. There's this famous picture of Nolan and Snyder meeting, and like just Snyder looks very excited to see Nolan, and like they look, you know, nice together or whatever. But it reminded me of that viral YouTube video of the Joker and the Pennywise.
Excellent. All right. So I guess for our next discussion, we'll probably be doing the Donner cut of Superman 2.
Oh, for sure. Would love to. I've never seen the original cut, so it's perfect.
Excellent.
I'm here. I'm the foremost scholar on director's cuts of films I've never seen.
Excellent. All right. Well, yeah, thanks for joining us. And so this has been our whole discussion. And yeah, if we can get it together, I'd really like to do a commentary. We're actually talking about what's going on in the movie and reacting to, how the story was told and how the characters were developed. We just touched on that, but I think that'd be more fun to
I would. Yeah, there's a lot to say there for sure.
Cool. All right. Well, I will take a look at the chat. Sorry, I couldn't keep an eye on the chat while this was going on. And
the conversation was too engaging.
It was. And I anticipate with our timing, it's a little bit difficult. But thanks for watching. And I'll see you in the chat. And we will hopefully be back with a commentary of the movie, because I'd like to sit through it again, and also, and together watching it. That's the one thing that I don't like about streaming is you do tend to watch things in kind of isolation and alone, and that's the one thing that movie theaters are good for is just feeling a group reaction to things, and losing that is
when I saw Dark Knight, I saw it in Japan, and when Joker does the pencil trick, I was the only one in the theater that laughed. And everybody looked at me, and I was like, "Oh, I have made a deep social faux pas."
Wow, it's disappear. Wow. All right. So thank you for joining us, and we will be back again with some other thing and such. Goodbye.